Welcome back to DAP Build. Today, I'm continuing progress, obviously, of my Porsche 911 Turbo replica chassis, Beetle chassis. I'm going to start fixing this base plate and making it straight and flush. It's crooked and jagged and all over the place from my removing it, so I have some clamps and the bolts and everything like that I had holding this piece down before. I'm just going to get the dolly tool set for the panel repair and just go about flattening all this out, so just hammering it down so it's all nice and flush as I can get it anyway. Once that's done, I'm going to consider my options, because honestly I'm waiting for an email, and until I get that email I don't really know how to progress through the rest of this week. So first off, what I'm going to actually do is remove all the scrap cardboard which is over the floor, and I'll most likely have to give the floor a mop as well as a bit of spray. Ew, even on the, yeah, okay. So yeah, I'll be doing that a bit later, just so it's a bit clean. I can work a bit easier that way. So I'll be doing that first, then move on to the chassis. Hopefully I get an email, and then we'll see what else happens. Ooh. Okay. So just putting the base plate back onto the chassis, and the chassis bulged, which is kind of understandable because all the stress, of course, would normally be taken up by this bottom piece, top piece I was going to say, but of course that wasn't present, and so resting the way it was, it's been kind of pushing and then billowing. So this is actually wider now than when it was beforehand. It's an easy fix. I mean, all I really need to do is concentrate on welding up one side, kind of just clamping that in, pulling it in, and then when I do the other side, obviously we're just compressing it, clamping that side along the way, and then of course tacking that up. So it will eventually pull itself back into shape, but it simply goes to prove just how much stress the entire thing takes when it's one unit. As soon as you remove something out of the equation or weaken it, completely changes the dynamics. So it's not a big issue, I'm not concerned about it, but it's just interesting to see. And of course, this front piece here, it's sitting a little proud, and I'm trying to figure out, there's a little piece of metal which I think it might have actually locked into place before and just kind of bent out of shape. So I'll simply hammer that back in. It's just a tiny little nick of a piece there, but everything else though seems to be pretty good. I've got the level really nice and flush. This here, weirdly enough, and I think it's just again due to the billowing, that's got a bit more of a gap, but again when I clamp it, weld it, it will be completely sorted. What's the other side look like? Yep, so once again, once it's all clamped down, a few little spots here and there, but again, it's not a perfect done job. It's just been hammered on concrete, which, you know, not ideal, but did the job reasonably well. And then I might just do a bit more panel beating once I've got a tack here and there on really nice flush surfaces, just kind of meld the whole thing together. So I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. I mean, decent outcome. So one thing I did way back when de-skinning this this chassis was to steal an idea from Chap Online, whereby putting some self-tappers in. Now this is really going to help, especially in this situation now where it's billowed out. So I simply have to find the holes in question, put them back in. That will kind of pull it back into shape for now. I can then go about tapping all the remaining metal together just so it's nice and flush. And then of course, when the time comes, we're just going to clamp it in a few key areas, do a few tacks along the way on one side, make sure it's all nice and taut. The best thing is, because of these swirl marks, I know exactly where the holes should be lined up. So this is going to make things a lot easier moving forward. So let's see if we can actually make any sort of difference. Here we go. Helps if I put this in the right direction. All the swirl marks are nicely lined up, which is exactly what we want. So that's perfect. I'll go about doing the other side, then we'll have a bit more of a look. I'm going to do this now. Nope, too far. That'll do it. Not 100% square, but it doesn't need to be. That's, yep, that's good. So all the weight is shifted now. We've got a bit more of a pendulum effect, a bit more here, centered. This section now will kind of pull in, and of course it's been resting without the skin a lot longer than what it's going to be for how long I'm going to have this, like this, but at least it'll start the process and it'll just be a lot easier. So current state of affairs. Well, this is temporarily back together. It's not going to be welded up just yet. I still have a couple more things to do. Number one, primarily being the fact that, as mentioned before, I do want to run the brake line internal. It is such a small detail, but it's such a small, important detail to me and how I want this car to be. I think also it's, with the overuse of the word important, to not deviate from my plan and of course achieve what I want more so than compromise on what I can. Because realistically, where I'm stumbling now is parts availability, which is going to be the case regardless. Unfortunately, the brake lines are still on back order. The hard brake line kit along with the park brake cables and the grommets. So that's kind of halted me. The trouble is that I need that in order to then weld the tunnel back up and of course then progress on other things. I did mention about removing this rear end suspension setup so I could do the flips and everything like that. The trouble is though that if I do remove that, I've then more or less got to put it back on, because at the moment, the rear end that I want to get for this car, there isn't one available at the moment. I've found a contact who wrecks 944s, and of course he does get these parts occasionally, but nothing at the present point. And of course, I'm not really there yet. Not that it really matters, I can do that whenever, but yeah, I can't do that. So that's another thing. Floor pans. This was a bit of a question mark, and of course something I raised last week. I was waiting for an email back from the engineer, and of course, because of the complexity with this car and being that it needs a certain test done, man, this phone's going off today. Because it needs a certain test done with the frame and everything like that, the space frame, I've been referred to another guy who's really great as well. He's been tremendously helpful with emails and everything at the moment. The problem is, because of that very reason, I was waiting to hear back from him. The floor pans, they have to stay original. So I do have to use Volkswagen floor pans in this situation. The reason being is that because it kind of changes the structural rigidity of the car, which sounds weird because I'd be improving it. But because it's not original, it's therefore seen as a, what they call an independently constructed vehicle, or ICV in our situation, because I'm changing so much of the base of the car. The way I'm getting away with this is that it is a reskinned or rebodied Volkswagen Beetle. If I change the floors, if I go beyond the realms of making it simply just a slightly modified or improved Volkswagen, floor pans aren't included, then it becomes an ICV, which means a world of headache, really a massive world of headache. It is simply because of the state I live in here. They are so strict with car modifications. So floor pans are going to remain factory, but I can't do the floor pans until I finish the tunnel. I don't have the floor pans yet. I've got to order them. So yeah, so what does that do for me? Well, if I don't have parts, I can't continue, which means that next week I've got a blank slate. However, I have been setting myself up for a secondary series that I want to release on a separate day, but for now it may actually replace my Sunday Porsche build. I'll reveal more details of that later. I might even do a little bit of a clip at the very end of this episode, depending on how long we run, just to give you a bit of an idea. But otherwise, I am simply going to wrap this episode up. So that pretty much does it for today, guys. Thank you very, very much for joining me. As always, like, subscribe, comment below, etc. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbor that if he's ever going to want to do custom floor pans, just don't live where I live. They are just ridiculous, use the right word, with car modifications. But anyway, until next time, guys, cheers.